You found it. Your home for the best content on your favorite team, the Fighting Tigers of LSU. Do us a favor. Subscribe to the channel. Leave your comments below. Be sure to smash that like button. Brian Kelly met with the media on Monday. Of course, the question that we all wanted an answer to is whether or not LSU has named a starting quarterback. And the answer is kinda.
We've made a decision, but I'm not going to announce it publicly. And again, this is for the certainly I think everybody here wants to know who the quarterback is. I get that, but I think it's a tactical advantage for us not to announce it. So I'm going to hold that announcement because I think it gives us a tactical advantage for not playing. Look, Florida State played a game. That's an advantage for them. Having the opportunity to play, the advantage for us is that we haven't played. And so it doesn't help us to give up any of our cards in that sense. So we're going to hold on to that card until game day.
I asked over the weekend and today, candidly, as many coaches as I could. And look, you do this long enough, you know a lot of coaches, different levels, high school, college, pro. I asked a bunch of coaches today and over the weekend, their feeling on the advantage, right? Who has the advantage? Florida State playing a game or LSU not playing a game? Again, the advantage would be LSU has game film on Florida State now. Florida State don't know what LSU's going to do. New head coach, new staff. Matt House hasn't been a DC since he was at Kentucky. He was at Kansas City, but he wasn't calling the defense. You kind of get a feeling like you know what Kelly and Denbrock are going to do. Like you could look at what they did at other places, but that still don't mean it's what they're doing with these players, and you don't know who the quarterback is. So it was so interesting because my feeling, right, and intuitively, my assumption is what Brian Kelly said. That's an advantage that Florida State had getting to play a game. You get to go have the dress rehearsal, the sort of walk through, work out a lot of the kinks and whatnot. And that makes a lot of sense. What I didn't really think about, or what surprised me, was how many coaches told me, no. As a coach, I'd rather the advantage of having game film on them, and they don't know what I'm going to do. Specifically, the LSU defense. I mean, that Florida State offense doesn't know what's coming from Matt House in this defense. Because I think one thing we can all agree, Ed Orgeron wanted a traditional 4-3 defense, right? I mean, that's what they did. This ain't going to be that. So it was very interesting. Again, I'm not relaying my opinion. That was a strong opinion from a lot of coaches saying, I would rather the element of surprise, meaning them not having film on me. And that certainly extends to the quarterbacks not knowing who it's going to be. One thing that Brian Kelly didn't say today, but I guess was assumed, is whether or not Jaden and Nussmeier know. He didn't specifically say if he sat them down and told them or anything like that. But we are to assume that he's got his starter, and they know at this point, because now they're into game week reps, and the guy who's going to start is going to be taking the first team reps. But Kelly was asked about the two and their specific skill sets and if that alters play calling and sort of the game approach.
There's some great similarities between the two of them in terms of what they're able to do. They both run extremely well. They both can make plays outside the pocket, and certainly we don't have to change the play calling. There's not a dramatic difference between the two when it comes to play calling. So you can imagine that, when we're talking about both quarterbacks, this is a 1A and 1B. This is not a 1 and a 2. And both of them, obviously are going to contribute this year.
There's not a dramatic difference between the two of them with play calling. That's the soundbite, essentially. And now, because early in this battle, if you remember in spring, Brian Kelly said, look, it was all install. Just all install. And once they got through a certain point of camp, they were going to start calling plays that were specific to the individual quarterbacks. Now, clearly, Miles Brennan was a very different style of quarterback than these two guys. And that would have mattered. But what he's telling you here is it ain't that big of a difference now. We're basically calling the same thing. It's just who can execute it. One more, and I think this is maybe the biggest reason of why I think they're going to choose the person I think they're going to choose, about the quarterbacks and their emotions in this opener.
Well, I think in this instance, they're going to be, so engaged because they know how close they are to playing every snap. It's not going to be, put your helmet underneath the bench. You need your helmet on, because I think that they'll be that engaged in the game itself. So this is a little bit different where, there might have been a clear difference in terms of how, and I think answering the question earlier is that we're going to be natural in the ability to kind of flip to the next play with the next quarterback. This isn't that you have to turn over your play sheet and go to, Jaden Daniels play calls or Nussmeier, game plan. It's one and the same. So I think that in itself keeps you so engaged in what's going on.
I think, so this weekend, we learned a couple of the starting quarterback jobs in the West, the SEC West. TJ Finley won the job at Auburn. Haynes King won the job at Texas A&M. So the returning player won the starting job over the transfer. Of course, Max Johnson transferred into Texas A&M, and at Auburn, you've got Robbie Ashford. I'm sorry, he's at Ole Miss. He's at Auburn. Robbie Ashford and Zach Calzada, 2 transfers. And it's interesting because, if that would hold here, you would say, okay, well, it'll be Nussmeier. I think the difference is the other guys had been there with their coaching staff prior. TJ Finley had been there with Brian Harsin. Haynes King has been there with Jimbo Fisher. All of the quarterbacks are new to Brian Kelly, so there isn't that history there to where you know the player. And maybe even more so, Texas A&M opens up against Sam Houston State and Appalachian State. Then week 3 they play Miami. You better believe both of those guys are going to play a lot in the first 2 games. They're going to use those first 2 games to see what they really have, so they got their guy week 3 against Miami. Auburn opens up against Mercer. You better believe both guys are going to play against Mercer, because next week it's Penn State. You better be ready to roll when Penn State comes in. At LSU, you don't have the luxury of the tune-up game. I mean, it's Florida State. The spread is inside of a field goal. You got to be ready to go snap 1, game 1. And they already played a game. Which is why I've leaned, a big part of why I've leaned all along toward Daniels. Again, I want to be very clear. And I know I've said this a lot, but just for the sake of the people who are going to say, you said, I'm not telling you I know. I don't know. I do not know. I'm telling you right now, I do not know which quarterback they've chosen. I don't know. My feeling all along, as I've told you since the spring, is you're going to go with the guy that's played in 30 games, that's got the experience, that has a dynamic skill set. I mean, all the reasons why you brought him here. And we'll see if that's what they choose, and if Jaden plays, if it is Jaden, if he plays well enough to keep the job. But ultimately, you got to start somewhere, and it makes the most sense that against that team that's already played, it's a Power 5 game, and all the stuff surrounding it, you go with the guy that's been in that situation before. And then next week against Southern, you try to get both of them as many reps as you can. And then you move forward from there against Mississippi State. And then, you play New Mexico. The schedule turns October, and you got to be ready to roll. But in the meantime, you got to beat Florida State. And who gives you the best chance to beat Florida State on Saturday? My guess is, and as it has always been, is that's Jaden Daniels. But I guess we'll all find out together when they tee it up, kick it off Sunday night in the Dome. Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact. And be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.